Always remember that Jesus has good news, always has good news in the midst of bad news. If you focus on bad, 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 you may miss it and not see the good news. There's always hope, which means future, in Jesus Christ for those who are attached to Jesus, who come under his teachings and follow him. Discipleship. Following Jesus. Learning and following. Learning and following. Learning and following. And this next passage of scripture, which is tied in the above scriptures, is about don't be afraid, not fearing. Don't be afraid. Please get this in your heart. Child, teenager, adult. Don't fear. You never have to fear the future, ever. That's throughout the scripture. But in this particular passage, he's instructing his apostles. He said, you're going to go out. He's preparing them, just like he's preparing you. And he says, don't be afraid of them, therefore. The them we'll talk about in a second. But do you remember the passage right before that? He said a disciple is like his master and cannot be above his master. And Jesus went through lots of persecution, but look at his future. He was raised from the dead. He sits at the right hand of God, exalted above the heavens as Lord and authority of the whole cosmos. The whole universe is under him. See, there's always a reward for those who follow Jesus. And when he says, fear not them, therefore, let's go back just a quick moment and review the list of the them. If you remember, he said, those towns and some houses and towns will reject you. Now, it seems like you should be sad. Well, there is a sadness throughout. It's not like we're all happy and everything of how people are acting and what people are doing to us and all, but it can turn quickly into rejoicing. If you remember, Jesus said, rejoice for those who persecute you for my name's sake. That means be happy about it. There's a sadness for the sake of the people, though, but not for a sadness for yourself. Never. Okay, then he's also warned them about, I'm going to send you as sheep among wolves. And this guy's looking this way and he looks this way, to be aware of those. He also, if you remember, said you'll be brought before like the politics of a church, the councils, a group of people who are over the church or something, or the synagogue. And churches are good. True Christian churches are good. But the synagogues, the Jewish synagogues, had some good people in it, but there were a lot of bad ones, especially the leaders who did not like Jesus. So he warned them about, you are going to be brought before synagogues and churches. Councils in the synagogues. And it's really sad on how they acted, these church people, the synagogue people. And then he said, you're not only going to be brought before the Jewish leadership, you're also going to be brought before the governors and kings, Roman governors and kings, people who are in charge of, the world. And he says, you're going to be brought before governors and kings. And some of them will reject you. Some of them didn't. In the book of Acts, they didn't, all of them. Family, even family, that's really that can really bring a deep sadness. But brothers, he mentions, fathers, he mentions, and sons, he mentions, how they even might reject you and then even lead you to death. Now, in our nation and many other nations, I don't think that's something you have to be afraid of, death for Jesus. But in some nations, it still happens. There are people who have to die for Jesus. As a matter of fact, the history of the church has gone through this. Think about what I just said. I have wonderful books here. I have this one, Fox's Book of Martyrs. A martyr is a person who gives himself to die for something. Okay, look at this, story after story. This is the beginning of the church, in the very beginning, the first century, and story after story as it goes along, like hundreds of years of story after story of people giving themselves to Christ. I haven't read the whole book. It's right here. I've read through it. But here's something I want to point out. I'm amazed on how wonderful these Christians accepted death. They didn't really care. and they wanted to die for Jesus. They actually were willing to die for Jesus. Now, what's also amazing in this book right here is that there are stories of children, young children that gave themselves for Jesus, and they loved it. They embraced the stakes and the crosses and things like that they were crucified on. Children, isn't that amazing? They loved Jesus, and they were willing to die for him who died for them. That's really cool stuff. Here's another book, by the way, and this is in the 20th century, in the 1900s. Look at all the stories of people that gave up their lives for Christ in the last 120 years. You know, it's just fantastic, story after story. And then here's another book. This is an encyclopedia, a whole book. Look how big and thick this is. The Encyclopedia of Christian Martyrs. Like story after story. Look at the writing here. Story after story of people who died for Jesus Christ. So what Jesus said was going to happen, happened. He predicted persecution, fierce persecution. And there have been times of peace, but there's also a lot of times of Satan making war on the saints. And so there's all kinds of people that are going to persecute, he said. He warned them of that. Oh, where did I put my eraser? Here it is. But I'd like to change each one of these faces here. Okay, see if I can get down here and change their cute little faces. And I would like to say, child, those who reject you, you know, you can actually be happy that you're living for God, and God is happy with you. Sure, it's going to be sad, you know, of how people are, and it breaks our heart just like it breaks the Father's heart. But no matter where or who you go and you're rejected by people, then you can just be so happy that you're pleasing God. You know, you can have joy in the midst of that bad time, of those bad times. And so no matter who doesn't like you or who insults you for being a Christian, you can have joy. And what did he say? He said, fear them, fear not them, or fear them not, or however you want to say it. Don't fear them. Okay, I'll say it that way. It's another way of saying it. Don't be afraid of, I'll put some exclamation points, of them. Don't fear them. Jesus said that to the apostles, and he says it to you. I'm not afraid of people. Not afraid what they could do to me. And he goes on and explains that even if they did kill you, which, you know, I'm in a wonderful nation that doesn't have that at this point, you know, that type of fear position where I'm going to be killed because I'm a Christian like other nations. But the fact is, they can only kill my body. And that's what Jesus said. They can kill your body maybe, but they can't touch your soul. Can't touch this. You know, your soul is in God's hands. And you have a body, and you also have an inward person. It's like, this is my house, a shell, my body, my flesh, my bones, my muscles, all that. But inside, I have a spirit and a soul. And that's immortal. My body will die, it'll corrupt, it'll sink into the ground and all that. But my soul goes straight up with God. And my life, which is what the soul is in God's hands. My life is, the word soul, we'll go into it more as we go into it. Maybe 1 Thessalonians chapter 5, verse 23 actually talks about it. But I'll say that it's that part of you that has your personality. It's the life that you're enjoying. It's the very life of you. It's the seat, if you will, of your thoughts and your emotions. And it's the very valuable part. Well, everything's valuable of God. Now, he also says, fear not him who is able to kill the body and do nothing more, but fear him who is able to kill body and soul in hell. Now, listen to that. It isn't just your soul that obviously goes there. Your body will also go there. You know, he'll take your body, just some art, like the Christian's body changes into a glorified eternal body, very powerful thing. Well, the sinner's body actually will be brought together back to its soul, and it also drops into a place of torment. So God has prepared a place of judgment against those who are going to persecute you So we need to pray for them. We don't want them to go there. And definitely, I'm not going to go there. So that's what Jesus is saying. You got to keep your eyes on the prize. You got to keep your eyes on the fact of your future. You got to keep your eyes on Jesus Christ. And if you are, destroyed or killed and all, for whatever reason, you're good. And this life is very short anyway. And then we have eternity to be with God. Then he says, he wants you to not fear, especially because your body is, your soul is gonna go on with God, and your body is just dead. He also mentions another thing that you don't have, why you shouldn't fear, is because he starts talking about a bird, a particular bird. He says, a sparrow. Well, actually, 2 sparrows are sold for a farthing, which I'm going to get to. He mentions a sparrow, and he says, and then he says, the Father knows about that. He says, without your Father not knowing that, he knows about that sparrow. If it dies, it could either from exhaustion or because of some shooting it. They actually took sparrows, by the way, which was the least of the birds. I have 2 birds here, and they have accepted the fact that they're going to represent the sparrows. They've agreed to it. Thank you. And we have 2 birds. I have a hen, and I have a duck. Okay, they're representing the sparrows since I don't have little sparrows. And these seem to be more popular, and other birds seem to be more popular. The least bird, it seems, in many cultures is that little tiny sparrow. It's very interesting, by the way. Over the years, I have loved sparrows. If I see different birds fly around, I could see the beauty of a red bird or a blue jay, the gorgeous colors, and I look at them for a time. But I love keeping my eye on the sparrow. And I think it's because I know that people don't notice them as much. Yet God notices them. That's what Jesus said. And he knows when they fall. One sparrow, by the way, there's thousands of them, millions of them actually across the world. But in Syria, there's tons of them, which is above Israel. And Israel has a lot of sparrows. And so Jesus picked that particular bird. And they actually sold the sparrow, 2 sparrows for a farthing. A farthing is really a piece of a penny, like 3/8 of a penny or 1/8 of a penny. Or, for example, a denarii is a whole day's wages. It's 1/16 of a denarii, which means it's less than an hour's day work. You can make a little money, and then you can buy a sparrow, and then you can kill it. And poor people ate it as food. Sparrow was a food for the poor because it was so cheap. And Jesus said, your Father, how does he say it? I'm going to quote exactly, without your Father. In other words, he says, and shall not fall. They fall out of a tree or something from somebody striking it with an arrow or something. He said, and one of them shall not fall on the ground without your Father. Without your Father, what does it mean? Well, I think it's like without your Father's presence being there. Without your Father knowing it. He knows, he watches every single sparrow. Those little insignificant birds. And then he goes, of course, he says, but the very heads of your hair are numbered. Here's another reason why he is showing that he cares about you and your persecution. If he knows that a sparrow is going through something, he knows when you're going through persecution, he recognizes it. And he even counts the number of hair, like the tiniest part, one of the tiniest parts on your body is right here, the hair. He knows how many hairs you have right now. He knows it. He knows everything about you. He says, fear not, therefore, for you are more valuable than many sparrows. If God cares for all the creatures on the earth, and he also allowed it, the Pharaoh to die. He willed it. He guided it. Well, he doesn't want the death, but maybe it's food for a poor person, which he says, yeah, I'm good with that. I need to feed the poor. Then he certainly knows when you're being persecuted. He certainly knows and allows you to give your life for him if that's what God calls you to do. So he says, fear not. He says it twice in that passage. In Luke 12, by the way, a parallel passage, he says he talks about fear 4 times in one verse. And we'll get to that later. This is a sweet passage. So, and you do not need to be afraid. And look at all those happy faces. This is really good news in the midst of bad news. it's so cool. So that we are in the hands of Jesus Christ. And I love that he prepared them, and he wants to prepare you. Recognize that people are not going to like you, but you should go ahead and share it anyway. And let's see. Yep. He also says, by the way, I didn't mean to miss this, but he says, nothing that is covered shall, he says, fear them not therefore. He says, for there is nothing covered that shall not be revealed and hid, that shall not be made known. And so he's saying that the message that you're going to give is eventually going to get out. Right now it's kind of hidden, it's concealed. And kind of Jesus was kind of hidden, although he was starting to get known, but he didn't share everything, the full gospel, and it came over time. He says, everything that I speak into you, he says, what I tell you in darkness, that speak in the light. And what ye shall hear in the ear, that preach upon the housetops. So Jesus is going to whisper into the ears of his disciples. And later he tells them that the Spirit of God is going to lead you in all things. And he said, I want you to share that stuff. And he also says, you know, these disciples are going to go through all this. God sees you in your pain and your being bullied on and all that stuff and the persecution that you're going to receive. And that's going to be brought out to the light. You are going to be brought out to the light. Hopefully it's all good. You know, if you're doing bad, you need to get that out to God, give it to him now, share it with him now so he doesn't show it publicly. But whatever Jesus shows privately, he says, go out and share that from the housetops. And the housetops, as I've talked about in previous videos, were flat. And so he said, you know, go ahead and share it as if you're on the housetop. By the way, on the housetops, public announcements were brought on the housetops from the evenings usually. This is a typical place. Let's say they wanted the village to come together and hear what a governor and mayor or some leader wanted to say. So they would come out on the housetop in the evening after everybody came home from their labors, and they would call everyone together and they would shout it from the housetops, announcements. And that's what he said to do. They understood that, they were aware of that. So even the shofar, the trumpet would sound when synagogue time was happening, you know, on Saturdays when they're supposed to come to the synagogue from a housetop. And so usually a leader would go to the highest housetop in that city, maybe in the central part, and call everyone together and shout. That's what he said to do. Just don't be afraid of it and be bold with it. So you too should not be afraid to talk about Jesus, and you should definitely share the gospel of the kingdom of God, that God is going to come back and God's rule needs to be placed in your heart, and you need to give your life to God and give it to Jesus Christ. So he says, fear not, therefore, there is nothing covered and shall not be revealed, and hid that shall not be made known. Including these evil people and what they're doing, they're going to be made known too. Both good and evil is going to be known. What I tell you in darkness, I speak in the light, and what you hear in the ear, that preach ye on the housetops. And fear not them that kill the body and are not able to do anything more. So I just want to encourage you to be bold for Jesus and share the truth all the time. And don't be afraid of anybody and what they're going to do to you. Okay? Go for it.